Well, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today on Wonderful Wednesday? And again, it's another great day to be alive and another gift, not only to receive, but to give as well. And yes, you know what that means when it comes to Wednesday? It's Conversations for Humanity. And we have our special guest, Debra Morrison, with us today to come share her story with us here on Conversations for Humanity. So, Debra, welcome to the show. Thank you. You can join us today.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All righty. Thank you so much. So, Debra, if you could please kind of tell us a little bit about yourself or like where you're from and everything, and get people to know a little bit about who you are, because I truly believe, Debra, the better question to ask is not what you do, is who are you? And I truly believe when people know who you are, it changes the whole dynamic. So, please share us who you are.
100%, Chris. Well, I am a woman that's north of 60, and I still have a lot of gas in the tank. So I have come, Chris, from a very humble beginning, raised on the western Pennsylvania, Ohio border on a 100-acre beef cattle farm. And that really was a very wonderful beginning. I'm grateful for it. At the time, it was really difficult, right? And no one, Chris, had to teach me work ethic. I mean, up at 4:30, gather the hen's eggs before you got on the bus, and you're the last stop from the school because you live in the country. And so you're on the bus at like 7, and you're doing your homework and you're sleeping on the bus, etc. So it was very, very filled with opportunity, challenge, and responsibility. And so it's a situation where a person that's been acclimated to that kind of responsibility, if you will, for little animals. I mean, pigs would birth little piglets, and they would be as little as your finger. And so we lined them up on my mom's cookie tray, and it sat in the pilot oven, and we fed them with an eyedropper each hour to keep it. I mean, so, people are like, you did what, and it was just like, that's what you do, because the piglets were born and they were small. So whatever it took, you see, we found a way. And that has engendered itself in my whole life trajectory. It's just like find a way. And I actually have Diana Nyad's book somewhere right here. I just love that title, to find a way. And so the MacGyver kind of tendency and quality that I have now, I'm really grateful for, because I'm your girl. In an emergency, call me. I mean, I'm good. I mean, blood can be spurting. I mean, it's shocking, and yet I'm operational. So I didn't come by that, with my own volition. I came by that very honestly, and I'm grateful for that, because it takes a lot to shake me. And I think that makes me a person that is able to lead in a way, okay, that from experience and knowledge and being open, of course, to the people's stories with whom I'm acquainted and read on a hourly basis. I'm a voracious reader. These are very, very telling attributes that I think we all have in some degree or another. And as we can raise up the leadership abilities in each of us, then we can imagine, to your point, Chris, we're better together.
Absolutely, 110%. So I got to ask you, though, how many pigs and farm animals was actually on that farm? Do you remember? And was that like to be on that farm?
Well, it was very, very changing, right? You might have had a plan for the day, and the hay was cut, and the weather didn't call for rain, and you look up and the sky is turning black, and you put that tractor in fourth gear, and you bale that hay, and you get that in the barn, because the price will be quite a bit lower if it's been rained upon. And so that kind of example. But we had 2 horses, I think 3 or 4 ponies, a slew of pigs, a lot of lambs and sheep, and mostly the farm was beef cattle. So we had 70, 80 head of beef cattle at any one time. We had chicks and peeps, and I don't think we ever had ducks, but we had some goats, and we just like had animals. And then we had fruit trees that we planted, and my mom had this double freezer, like 2 huge freezers, right? And we would not be going to the grocery store and buying jam. Absolutely not. We would be picking the fruits and making the jams, canning in the old days, and then freezing. And it was really amazing. My mom baked 6 loaves of bread and a huge, as big as it could fit into the oven, of
Wow.
buns twice a week because my dad and 4 kids, she was packing lunches for all of us kids with that bread. And so it was different than many kids, I tell you that.
Wow. And I kid you not, I remember the days of the mason jars.
Right now.
So,
Right now. Yeah. Now let me tell you a funny story about the homemade bread. So
okay.
of course we had, we had our own beef, of course, and it almost wasn't a meal without some kind of meat, right? That's just how I was raised, and I know it's politically incorrect, and yet this child does enjoy meat. So we had meat, and then we had farmers that were like more pigs and other things. So we got, we had our share of that and milk, although I never drank milk. So that was interesting, but we had our homemade bread, and my mom would cut it really thick, and we had peanut butter and of course homemade jelly. Well, it didn't take us long. We went to school, and I was like looking around at all my friends' lunch, and this that Wonder Bread, and I thought, oh my God, I've never even had that. Like they bought that at the store, And so I would trade, Chris, my peanut butter and jelly with homemade bread. It's like this thick jelly sleazing out of the sides of it, and peanut butter. And kids would line up. No, today's my day, and give me their Wonder Bread, Chris, with a slice of bologna, and I would call it a good trade. Now,
Oh my God. I remember those days about trading lunches and everything like that. But
isn't that fun?
I think that takes the cake right there to be able to now, my gosh, running it down. No, that's mine.
I know. I mean, nearly fisticuffs. I mean, because it was that good. The issue was so fun. And it took me a very long time before I actually owned up to that to my mom. I think I was out of college. And she goes, "You what?" I said,
Yeah, that's amazing. Charles, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you two doing?
"Excellent. Better since you've joined us."
Glad that you are here and everything. So, Charles, if you could please introduce yourself.
Okay, so I am Charles. As you may infer from my accent, I am from the U.S., but I am living in Costa Rica. So, living a lifelong dream of living in Latin America, but then and loving it, but also struggling as, from my vantage point, I'm in a foreign country with a foreign culture and a foreign language. Obviously, for them, they grew up with the language and culture, and there's absolutely nothing foreign about either to them. But as a North American, obviously, I'm used to English and U.S. culture, not Spanish and Latin American culture.
All right. Thank you so much. Glad that you're here with us, Charles, and we're glad that you're a part of the conversation today and everything. And it's amazing, though, when we just show up to opportunity and we go into other people's cultures like Charles has done in Costa Rica, we can learn so much and grow so much from that, because those kind of experiences are the ones that are literally priceless by very design. Because I truly believe to a large extent, without those kind of moments that we have, I won't say deprive ourselves of something that we can learn from it, but we get so much out of that opportunity. It's just almost like when you have that bucket list and you have those things that you want to do, and let's say you never get around to do it that year or whatever the case may be, you kind of like, oh man, I could have done that. But when people step out of that comfort zone and really say, I'm wanting to do this and everything, that's truly amazing in and of itself. So Charles, kudos to you for being in that culture in Costa Rica and learning and growing from those people down there and everything like that. And Deborah, I know you've been probably around the world, but I got to ask you this. What is the one place or a few places that really said, this is the most unique place I've ever been?
Whew, that's a good question, Chris. Unique. Well, I actually I was raised Baptist, and I happened to be the president of the Youth Association right after the Managua, Nicaragua earthquake. And so the presidents of the Baptist Youth Associations went down to Nicaragua on a work tour. And you remind yourself, now this is almost 6 months after the Managua earthquake, and a lot of that city was flattened, and there were huge piles, some of them still with red flags, which meant there were human remain still. And so you can imagine we were all wearing masks. This was a very unique situation because that city was dealt a flattening, every pun intended, blow. And yet the people's attitudes were of hope filled. You see, they were not accustomed to some of the quote unquote first world, if you want to be that hierarchical, but some of the richer countries and populations and peoples. And they were alive, you see, and they took that life value above all that was quote unquote materially flattened, right? And we bonded with them. Now, I took a couple of years of Spanish, but probably went in one ear and mostly out the other. And yet I would occasionally throw in a word in Spanish that I remembered. And one of the words I think, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, was like despacio. It was like slow down. Like when they would talk, it's like, let me catch a noun or something. And they were I took my guitar down and we were all singing. They were on the edge of their seats, appreciative that I and a few other of us, probably about 25 of us, were speaking their language, because we didn't just come in as hierarchical, we're here to help you. It was really a wonderfully bonding experience. I came back a very different 11th grader. Literally in the day, Chris, we landed in Miami on the tarmac. You had to walk down the stairs and walk into the terminal. I came down the stairs and I fell to the tarmac. It still checks me out. Fell to the tarmac and I kissed that tarmac. But by the grace of God, I would have been born in a country where I would have been, a wholly different person. And yet the issue is these people have such a soul, and their souls and their hearts and their faith are probably a multiple of many of ours. And I learned so much. And I really became an advocate of like, hey, send kids that are out of high school, on a 1-year hiatus to a different country that not quite as rich as the United States, right? America, and allow them to see and expand their horizons, because there's an indelible mark that happens when we see things with our own eyes. And I'm not taking away from imagination, because that's powerful as well. And yet this really helped me, Chris, bring humanity together. And so my ideas about charity were always very, very ensconced. I mean, in the Baptist church, you tithe 10% and then you offered, and a lot of people, they don't understand that, but we did, and it was expected, and we gifted a lot. And so this was just a further cementing, if you will, 11th grade. And I've never been the same since. So it was an amazingly unique experience. I'm just grateful for it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it transitions me into the great John C. Maxwell and what he did many years ago. And I learned this when I was listening to his great book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yes.
And there was a trip that he took to Russia years ago, and he didn't know how to really convey the message of what he stood for and how he wanted to present himself to the people of Russia. So what he ended up doing, I kid you not, this is a true story. His family was with him at the time. So his daughter was with him. And his daughter was a singer by trade. So what he did with her, he asked her, he's like, can you sing the Russian national anthem in their native language? And next thing you know, she did that. And that's the way he connected. And that goes right back to that great book too, as well, from John C. Maxwell, that everyone communicates if you connect. And that sparked me right there when you just shared that, Deborah. And it just really just like opened up my eyes and say, that's amazing that can have that kind of an effect on you from that one trip that literally maybe even transformed your life.
It did.
Absolutely. And Sharon says appreciation happens when we see and experience things. And then she even says attitude makes a tremendous difference. That is so true, Sharon. And we would love for you to join the show too as well. And I hope you are watching on Facebook. I just sent you the link via Facebook on the Facebook stream. We would love to have you here and everything. But it's about that time at the top of the hour. So, Deborah, please come share your story with us here on Conversation for Humanity.
Well, thanks, Chris. And we got into a nickel of it earlier. The raised on the farm piece was very critical to to me and my development and my sensibilities, if you will. It was a situation where in the birth order, my sister was born first, then me, then actually a younger brother who died at age 2 days old, and then 2 more boys. So the girls were born first. So when there were duties on the farm to be done, there was no gender, disparity. I mean, there was just no, holding out for the boys. They weren't even born yet, right? So we were on the tractor, like at a very young age. Like, I don't think I had enough body weight, I'm sure I didn't, to push in the clutch without standing on the clutch and holding the steering wheel and then shifting, right? Now, some people might call that something like childhood labor now, but it was just the norm, right? That's how it happened. It was only years later that I heard my father say, when I asked the girls to rake the hay in second gear, they did. And when I asked the boys to rake the hay in second gear, they raked it in fourth gear. And I was like, oh my heart, we did what we were told. And our brothers just got away because they liked speed. Who doesn't like speed? So it's very, very funny. But anyway, I was a young girl who lived the farthest away from the school. So we really didn't participate in after school activities, because who was going to shuttle us back and forth? There was work to do, right? Depends on the season. You get off the bus, you grab a piece of homemade bread and some peanut butter, and you went up to the barn and you either cleaned grain, shook out old burlap bags, turned them inside out, and bagged up 80 bushel of oats or wheat or whatever it was in the season that we were selling. And it gave us a notion of trade, if you will, right? Now, my dad, he never wrote an agreement. In the day, you shook hands. Like my dad did, shook hands. That was his word, was his bond, and that's my word. My say-do ratio, I always want that to be as close to 1 as possible. And so that was engendered in the farm. And we had a little town fair, right? Little town fair, which is now like, I don't know, maybe 100 years old, called the Transfer Harvest Home. So for kids, we're all farm kids. Like, you'd have hay pitching contests. And what did you have, Chris? I don't think I've ever said this on national or on TV or the internet. We had a greased pig contest. Now, you wouldn't have this today, but we had a greased pig contest. So they had chicken wire fence in a fairly large circle. They had this little piglet. It wasn't so little, but it was probably like that, right? And they put lard all over them. And then they had little age groups. So 6 and below, or whatever, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, whatever it was. And if you caught the pig, you would get, and I think in the day it was $10 or $12 cash. Or you could take the pig. Well, other kids that won it, they went right up to the concession stand and they got their $12 and they started riding the rides. No, this child won the greased pig contest. There's me holding a greased pig. I don't think I've ever shown this picture to anyone before. So, Chris, right there. So here I am. And I was in the newspaper. I freaking won it every year, right? Because my dad threw a quarter on our bed every so often for an allowance. Trust me, and I took the pig, and then my dad would either raise it or sell it at the market, and we get $20, $25. This was like a great return on an investment of running around a slippery, lard-filled grass area and attempting to grab the pig long enough to indicate you got the pig. So that was, because it was very curious. Like, my dad just had to say to me one time, you're going to take the pig. Well, this was interesting because he was inferring I'm winning. So that was he didn't really, give us a lot of laudatory comments. There was a lot of work to be done on the farm. And yet there was this confidence that we would do it. And so I ended up doing a lot, pounding through the crunchy fields with gum boots on in the middle of the winter with 20 degree below zero, and the cows were out. We had to find the cows, get them back in. And I'm trudging through with my sister, who was maybe a year and a half older than I, a couple years older than I. We got wrenches, we got some this and that, some wire stuffed in our jacket. And I say to her, did you ever fix a fence before? And she goes, nope. And I'm thinking, well, I surely haven't. But I'm not coming out here tomorrow and chasing cows. No, I'm not. We're finding those cows, getting them in, and we're doing something to fix that fence. Now, how many kids that were raised in like Newark, New Jersey, or New York City, or Los Angeles, or Dallas, maybe Dallas, they might have done it, but that was a very interesting life skill. And so I really patterned my life after doing efficient work, right? Being as efficient as possible. And much later on, as a matter of fact, it was 1999, I was across the across the producer desk on CNN Live, across from Stuart Varney. And he said, and I'm a certified financial planner by that time. And he said, Deborah, what's your best asset? Well, of course, I'd managed money for 20 years at that time. And I was thinking, oh, I just literally said to God, give me an answer. Like, what do you say? A stock, a piece of real estate? And out tumbled from my lips, Stuart, I have two assets in life, time and health, and I don't want to waste either one of them. Well, wow. I got back in the limo back to New Jersey, and I thought, thank you, Lord, because this is such a mantra for my life, and I have just used it extensively since. I'm also a certified grief coach, in addition to practicing certified financial planning for 42 years. I am absolutely maniacal about people becoming aware and appreciative of life itself, because there's no guarantee for tomorrow. I often say people in the obituaries that probably 98% of the people didn't plan on being there yesterday. So let's be about using our time efficiently. It doesn't mean never make a misstep or a mistake. We're all going to do that if we're moving. And I certainly vote for us to be moving. It does mean, however, for us to not sit blithely by and say, someday I'll, and basically absent ourselves to the opportunities that I believe God and the universe and the angels and the heavens have given us and our environment. And I am all about stepping into our power. So basically, go to college 5.5 hours away, major in business, wanted to learn investments because my grandfather was an investment advisor. So he had given each of us kids a few shares of stock to help with college education. And his hands were trembling as he gave us those stocks. And he was not an emotional man. And I just thought to myself, that's amazing that there's more to that than paper. And so that, coupled with my aunt Frida, who was from New Jersey, the big city, and whatever, non-farm, took us out to over here to New York. I'm right outside of New York now. New York City Stock Exchange, Chris. And I looked down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and I was just like I just wanted to be there. My nose was pressed against the plexiglass, and I thought to myself, those white men, throwing tickets up, shouting and running around. The tickets were up to their calves and so forth. And I said to myself, I am going to be about that energy. And since I have basically decided and portrayed money as energy, you see, and I hold money up so as not to imagine that anybody should be worshiping it. Nobody sees me getting down on my knees worshiping this. This is, however, the currency, for our opportunities. Some of what about our why in life, not that everything costs money, and certainly not that everything meaningful costs money. And yet there's a lot of meaningful things that do cost money. And I would always like to have choices. And I like anybody with whom I'm operating with and dealing with in a client. Now, I'm a financial leadership coach. I want my peeps to have choice. I want you to have choice. I want humanity to have choice. And this happens when we have some of this greenback. This is the bridge, if you will, perhaps to opportunity to lessen our pain and to expand our horizons, to grow fully into all we were called to be and meant to be. And that's a big charge, right? I was raised Christian fundamentalist. Don't bury your talents under a bushel. Don't hide them under a bushel. Now, I didn't mention along the way, I decided shortly after high school, oh boy, I'm like attracted to girls. And I was raised Christian fundamentalist. And in the day, and in some pockets today still, homosexuality was an abominable sin. Outside of God and the creation of God. And it was horrific. It was horrific because I loved Jesus. I was a Christian and I was pretty sure I was lesbian. So that kind of having to live undercover, that kind of feeling, Chris, that we're in occupied territory. Now, Charles, you're talking about you're visiting or you're living now in Costa Rica and it's not your first language, et cetera, et cetera. And yet when we consider, and people that have lived in occupied territory in any facet and any degree have an appreciation for that feeling outside, like on the other side of the plexiglass. And I think that challenge of me, growing and finally learning at the tutelage of a dear friend whose exegesis was wonderful, and she realized that she was reading John Donne and Shakespeare and Herbert because her PhD was in English literature with more contextual acuity than the Bible, which she considered the Word of God and that which on her life was pattern. So I began to be schooled and read more about the contextual aspects. And of course, there's nothing contextually sound in the Bible that condemns homosexuality. So I juxtapositioned myself into a position of not just for my own good, yet for the expanded understanding, right? Because if we were to define Debra in one word, it probably would be curious. I am endlessly curious. And so I read because I don't know it all. And I know I don't know a lot. So I am always open to learning more and also understanding how with neuroplasticity, we can regroove those neuron pathways. And so our past does not define our present or future. It doesn't have to. And in so many cases, we find ourselves ensconced in, well, that's how I was raised. Well, that was then. And you probably didn't have an iPhone then, yet or any other modern convenience. And so I founded the company We Can Do It Women. And yes, my swim lane, 45 years, is finance. And yet with finance, then people can bloom into spawning dreams. And because earlier you say, what are your dreams? And people are like, how do you spell that? There was a Paul cast, on our society long before the pandemic. 2006 Great Recession. I mean, the dot-com bomb, dot-com bust before that, et cetera. And then, of course, the pandemic. And so I'm about saying we can do this, particularly to women, because the opportunities aren't quite so good. And the pay inequities and so forth have led to a large percentage of our population, at least in the United States of America, being undersaved, the female population being undersaved, right? And so I'm here to say, hey, here's the clip notes. Here's the clip notes. I want you to, I've gone ahead as a scout, right? And my dear late friend, Dr. Susan Jeffers, who authored Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and 13 other, I think, New York Times bestselling books, she called your intuition like a scout that's gone ahead and then circles back and says, you guys, there's a pothole around the curve. Drive your financial car and avoid with those tires that financial pothole, because one, you're not filled with so much things like, oh, I'm in a pothole. Two, you're still going to get to your destination probably on time. And three, it's just easier. So I have used my experience, that of mine and my clients, to leverage the We Can Do It Women vernacular and the attitude and the hope. I'm a harbinger of hope all day long, especially for women to get their arms around their finances. And it's not that hard. I use analogies all the time, and women start to get a footing, and then there's really no stopping them, because their imagination and their intuition and their intuitive nature and their feeling, their emotionality does lend itself very well to mastering the art of finances. So I have then progressed to wanted to learn investments, and they were like, we're not going to put, money into a 21-year-old, in 1978. And so they said, why don't you just run along, Debbie, and you sell life insurance? They thought I'd be out the door in about a week, right? And I said, I heard about life insurance, but tell me the ins and outs of life insurance. And they did. And I led the agency for 2 years in sales, 22 years old. Why? Because I realized this is a product that can keep families and businesses together. And I believed in it. And then after leading the agency 2 years, I said, okay, boys, I'm going to learn investments. And so I did. And I got the Series 7 and the registered principal and so forth. But when the opportunity, Chris, for fee-only advising became available in 1999, I said goodbye to about 6 figures of renewal income from my commissions that I had sold up until then. And I went fee only because I didn't want anybody thinking or saying, Deborah, what's in it for you if I, buy this life insurance policy, right? I just want it to be pure, like above the fray. And I wanted to take in my clients' deepest fears, their best goals, and then meld their investments, maybe take out the weak links, put in new, better links, and give them the mindset and the hope that they can do it. And they spawned more and more dreams. And so my clients gave $100,000 rose windows to their church. They took their family of 27 people on a Disney cruise for a week. They took, another client took their whole family on a cruise, and then somebody went to Disney themselves. And they did magnificent things, funded their grandkids' education to the hilt with Section 529. We absolutely made this tool called money put huge smiles on their face. And it was absolutely life-changing for them and me. Now, one last thing. I talk now, I have courses on creating intentional wealth and so forth and so on. And people kind of sometimes think, well, I gotta say, this is my money and I better save it. No, here's the latest. The latest is one of the best fast tracks to accumulating and creating more wealth is, Chris, giving. Giving. The art of giving brings humanity together. Now, you will give to whomever has been instrumental to you. Maybe it's a church or synagogue. Maybe it's an individual, an organization. Don't expect to get a return back from that person or entity to whom you gave. Yet you will find just like, oh, I happened to get a check that was double what I gave. Oh, no, it wasn't a happen to coincidence. It is what we call manifestation, right? We are manifesting our futures, and it's not selfish to manifest our futures because, like the airlines say, if the airplane loses pressure and the oxygen masks drop from the overhead compartments, put your own mask on first. And I don't think women have had that memo. They're outwardly focused. And I have a chapter in a collaboration book, and I started with that. And it's actually kind of humorous, if I don't mind saying so. The pilot doesn't come on and say, men, put your own masks on first. Women, look to the side, look to the other side, stand up, take your seatbelt off, stand up, look at the people in front of you, look at 3 rows behind you. If you're still alive, when everybody you see has their mask on, put yours on. And I say stuff like that, and it's like, what? She's nuts. Yeah, I'm nuts for the truth is what I am. I'm nuts for facts that actually bear themselves out in real life. And I've lived a lot of real life. I hope to live a whole lot more. Yet what I've lived, I'm grateful for. And the lessons I know about this tool called money are expanded every single time with every single person with whom I deal. And the stories of women who in the pandemic were getting checks, they weren't going out. So I had a membership group, and I said, let's open up systematic savings accounts with this extra quote unquote pin money. Women came back, Chris, after only 2 years, and they said that they were like ashen. I never imagined that when I started this, I have saved over 2 years, $8,000. And then one person said, no, 12,000, no, 21,000 in 2 years. That's the plus we made out of the pandemic. One of them. I'm not taking anything away from the pandemic. Nearly 1 million people died. And in my humble, I don't know if that was all necessary with regard to what happened at the beginning of that pandemic. And yet I want to be sensitive to the grief. And as a grief coach, I don't take on individual clients, but the grief recovery attitudes and techniques and skills that I have learned are interwoven into my writing, into my speaking, into my one-on-one coaching in a way that lifts people up and sheds the shame. Shed the shame. We're in a period of time where change is very rapid, and yet never again will change happen this slowly. Try that on for size. And now we have no excuse to sit into neutral. Let's seek out the professionals that can guide us and coach us in areas that aren't our swim lane. And I'd be happy to help any of the people and coach any of the people. Help, I don't want to use that word. I'm happy to coach any of the people, have one-on-ones and have just little chat sessions in order to engender hope. We're in this together. And yet I want you to muster all of your leadership abilities, bring them to the fore, and bring all the people around you. And you may not even see all the people around you because the ripple effect is quite endless. Energetically, it's quite endless. We could be sending out and these positive messages, and someone is feeling better in Taipei right now, in Singapore. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And so I want us to expand our imagination that there's more than what we have experienced. I want us to be present in the now. And then I want us to take radical responsibility to put down at least a skeletal plan as to where we'd like to go. And yes, we'll pivot. Yes, we'll enhance. Yes, we'll step into bigger opportunities. And yet I want us to be, yes, ready. And I know that the Virgin Atlantic founder, good grief, his name just slips me. Says,
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson, thank you. Say yes. Figure out the how later. Like women say, well, I don't know how to do that. Did you know how to birth a baby? Did you know how to, get partnered? Did you know how to maybe run a family? Probably not, right? Even if someone wrote books on it, which they do, you're going to have your own experience. And we're going to go through some aspects of life without knowing the end. And that's particularly important in finance. People say, I don't know what the next step is because, I don't know. And I don't know each step of the way in the end. Guess what? I have news for you. If you take the next proven strategy from a non-biased professional and you continue to be in motion, I'm going to suspect that the end, even if you knew those steps and what you perceive as the end, your end is going to be a multiple, not just in dollars, but in experience of anything you can imagine right now. And so I want to leave us with the idea and support your work, Chris, wholeheartedly in bringing humanity together and completely energizing and epitomizing and bringing people to the fore that say, we are better together. Yes, we are. We can do it, women and men. And we can create an unbelievable world if we bring our minds and our intentionality towards really all for one kind of goals and one for all.
And I love that, Deborah. And I'm right now trying to find that picture of that quote that you referenced to when it comes to Richard Branson. And American television producer and screenwriter was Shonda Rhimes, who wrote the book The Year of the Yes. Diane, we would love you to join the call. We would love to hear from you. But like I said, I'm right now looking for that because Richard Branson, I have learned so much from him, right? Because he actually came from a place of dyslexia.
Yes,
and that was a big thing for him in and of itself. And he ended up creating something so powerful. It was just truly amazing what he did with Virgin, because originally it was only going to be the record company.
Yes, exactly.
Then that record company turned into Virgin. They were trying to do something in the publishing space, but that didn't really take off. And everything. And then next thing you know is Virgin Atlantic. And then that took off.
You bet. In every sense of the word.
Yeah, it did. And so I found the quote, and I'm going to share it with you guys now. It says, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity, not sure how to do it, say yes and learn how to do it later. And I got to ask you, Deborah, and then we'll go over to Charles here in just a second about what he's heard so far and what really resonates with him. I got to ask you, Deborah, why don't we say yes to opportunity? And why do we literally don't take stock in the very things that's literally before us in and of itself and everything? And that, for me, I was like that way for many years when I was younger. I thought that I knew it all. I didn't need anyone's help. I didn't have to do this. I didn't have to do that. And Diane said yes. She said she spent a year saying yes into the things that she would be normally say no to.
Yeah.
And then she says her daughter plays a huge role in the running of his company today. And if that's Richard Branson, you're absolutely right. His daughter really does a lot of the day-to-day for Virgin. But like I said, Deborah, for whatever rhyme or reason for each and every single one of us, why do we say yes less probably, and we actually say more of the no? Why do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, this I reached over my bookshelf to get, and it says, it's a quote by Renda Ryder, who's an artist: "Your comfort zone will kill you."
Ooh.
And there's a notion by which we get ensconced in the routine and in the comfort of the routine, and it kind of lends itself to a mindlessness. Now, I don't mind routine, and I have a number of routines, which I think are very positive in my life. And yet when we shut down our intellectual capacity to explore and to learn new trades and ideas and thought patterns, then we are short-circuiting the entire energetic flow of the entire universe, frankly. Now that's, probably, 30,000 foot view that some people may not appreciate. But my dear late friend, Dr. Susan Jeffers, nailed it in her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Because I think, Chris, behind some of this reticence to say yes is this fear. Like, I don't know. I'm probably too stupid. I can't figure it out. What if I fail? All right. So Susan said, and I know this off the top of my head because she's just a dear friend, and I love that book, and all Embracing Uncertainty. Like, if you want a book, Embracing Uncertainty. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Dr. Susan Jeffers. Embracing Uncertainty, Dr. Susan Jeffers. Right now, both of them should be on your reading list. Well, they should. Let's get out of the should pile. Sorry, Deborah. I invite you to entertain both books. Now, Susan said, when so many people are fearful and yet are out there doing it anyway, we must conclude fear is not the problem, rather how we hold the fear. So she came up with the pain power continuum. And on the pain side is depression, helplessness, paralysis. And on the power side is encouragement, goals and action, etc. I may not have them exactly right. And I loved the continuum I talk about in my TEDx talk, Feel the Financial Fear and Do It Anyway, because we all are going to, slip into some fearful moments. And yet, as I say in all of life, you might spend a night or rent a room there for a night or two, but not be buying a house on that pain side. No, we're going to know that we can slide just as quickly over to the power side, not power over, patriarchal in this society, heteropatriarchal. No, power within. As Oprah says, the answer is within. And another, mystics had said it long before Oprah. But this is the notion that I want to project, and that is that our fear is really misfounded. And you know how you know that? Everybody can think of something that you were afraid of doing, but you did it, or yet you did it. And when you did it, you're like, that wasn't so bad, right? And so I ask people, sometimes, like, if you picture a busy highway, whatever the biggest highway is near you, 2-3 lanes in one way, would you imagine crossing from one side of the eastbound and then the westbound? Would you imagine crossing over those 4-6 lanes of traffic without the benefit of a traffic light to stop the traffic? Would you imagine it? I ask this in speeches, and people are like, what is she talking about? And I said, no, heck no. Now, how about if your 3-year-old granddaughter's on the other side of those 4 lanes or 6 lanes and saying, Grandma, we're all across those lanes, yes? So it depends. So let's imagine if our life or someone else's life, in any degree of life, not necessarily pulse versus no pulse, but the expansion of life depends upon us taking the next courageous step. Because when our friends see us taking a next courageous step, and then we're having coffee or wine or whatever we're having with them later, we say, yeah, I was a little scared to take that step, but I did it anyway. And then a person's going to leave that meeting and that encounter or that Zoom exchange and say, if she can do it, I can do it. And somehow that lodges back here. And so the next time we have an opportunity, I invite us to say yes. Say yes, because this is the gateway to whatever I believe God and the universe, and that you may have, or others around you hoping for your best interests in life, have manifested this new opportunity. If you want to entertain yourself, go on the internet or chat and find out how many of today's products were invented based upon what people perceived as a misstep or a failure. I want us to get over our allergy to failure. That's nonsense. You never, ever will see a winner who hasn't made a misstep. Ever. You will never see one. And I very seldomly use ever or never. But every winner has misstepped. Now, I like misstep versus mistake because we kind of put the cement shoes on mistake and we kind of stay ensconced there from time to time. Misstep connotes action. Oh, I made a misstep. I'll take another step. I'm in motion anyway. I'll get back on the on-ramp and I'm good to go. So from an investment angle, if Warren Buffett can admit to $4 billion, that would be with a B, missteps. Who are we to think we're going to go through this life investing without a misstep? It's nonsense. Let's shed that expectation, which all it does is put a damper on us and our future and our opportunity. So let's say yes. Let's feel the fear and do it anyway, and we will figure it out. I have every confidence in you to put your mind into complete dedicated focus to just the next step, not the end result, the next step. So yeah, I mean, the funny example, Post-it notes, was in the thing as something that was invented out of a what people might have called a failure, if you will. Viagra. Look it up.
Yeah, I love where this conversation is going. So let's bring Charles into the mix. And thank you so much, Diane and Sharon, for sharing all those wonderful thoughts in and of itself. But Charles, I want to go to you, sir. What shows up for you in this great and engaging conversation with Debra's story so far?
Well, one thing that shows up for me is that we need to look beyond just strictly business and look at karma, God's will, however you want to describe it, where obviously if we have a business, we need to make money, but not necessarily with every client. Where if we say, okay, I'm going to invest in this client expecting nothing, knowing that I will likely receive nothing, at least monetarily, back, but I'm going to help them anyway.
Yeah.
And then we get other clients who, because they heard about it or because of karma, God directing them, however you want to look at it, they come to you and they bring in you money and they pay you for your service or your product or whatever. And living down in Costa Rica, like I said earlier, is a dream come true. But too often we say yes to things that we know how to do and are easy, and maybe we should say yes, maybe we shouldn't. But like, for example, Chris, if I say, hey, my toilet's broken, can you come over and fix it for me? If you were nearby, you might say yes. Should you? Great question. But because you know how to do it and it would be easy, you might say, sure, I'll come right over. Whereas if I say, hey, Chris, I'd like you to manage the farm I live on. Since you probably have never managed a farm, you probably would be like, no, Charles, that's not something I want to do. Whereas perhaps you should if I gave you that offer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you really think about it, Charles, those opportunities comes and knocks on our door literally sometimes unexpectedly, but sometimes when we do expect it to come, it's about us answering it in a way that we understand and know maybe this will work best for me if I say these are the things that I want to do with it. And again, like to Deborah's point about just taking that step forward. And by taking that step forward, it gets us into that next step. And that next step leads into, it's like, again, that very great quote, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with the very first step. And by allowing that to be in our lives and everything, and again, I will have to go back to John C. Maxwell and his great book, Failing Forward.
Totally.
If we fail forward and we look at it as a learning tool in and of itself, and I have to bring Star Wars into the mix because it really is truly pivotal right now in and of itself with this conversation. Failure is the best teacher, and that was said by Master Yoda in the Last Jedi. And it's about, and I got to go to you, Deborah, on this. When it comes to failure, is it that mindset perception that we deem failures to be that very negative thing and we don't look to it as a positive? And if that's the case, why don't we do it?
Well, there are probably millions of answers to that question, Chris, and it's an excellent question. I think that sometimes we don't get the full impact of a lesson, if you will, until we've lived it. So we can look over to our sister, and maybe she's just a new widow. Maybe her husband's died prematurely. Now, that woman, in the depth of her, in the throes of her grief, realizes that everything, like literally everything about her life, her imagination, her expectations, her dreams, boom. Sometimes that quick. And yet, because I have 25 years speaking to widowed groups, I've talked with thousands of widows. Now, they don't say this the first week, but in time, they say this, Chris. The worst thing that ever happened to me ended up being the best thing, because I don't take life for granted anymore. I tell the people I love that I love them. I'm intentional about my next steps. And up until that moment, I can't judge these people. A lot of us are just kind of blinders on, if you will. We're going to rinse and repeat. And that may be okay if you are absolutely happy and fulfilled where you are. However, if you have an imagination, you read books, you look at YouTube videos or films or something like that to expand your imagination, and you have this little spark inside that says, hey, I wonder if. Do you think I could do that? Because we are examples, as I say, for our friends and family and those that in our communities. And so when we take the action, which is leading, right? When we take what we think is a private action, other people are looking in and said, holy camoli, look at the adversity he faced. And somehow they're still putting one foot in front of the other. Now I invite us to go to these friends that aren't necessarily holding their hand up and asking for help, because maybe they don't have the strength and the vulnerability to do that, to say, how are you? Now, I don't want anybody, let me just give you a little grief lesson real quick. I don't want anybody saying to a grieving person, call me if you need something. Nonsense. They're freaking paralyzed. Their mind's in a blender. No, instead you say, listen, if you're in an environment in the summer, listen, why don't I come by, have my husband or partner come by with a lawnmower, and I'll mow your lawn once a week for the next couple of months. Why don't I babysit the kids so that you can go to the gym on Thursdays, or would Tuesday morning be better? Allow them just to say, yes, mow the lawn. Yes, take the kids on Tuesday, so that you are being a participant in their self-care, because up until then, from the time of the notice of the death, or the hearing of the death and the understanding of it, they've basically been frozen, and their self-care is probably in the pits, done that outward thing. I gave pro bono service to 7 widows, 1 widower, and a 12-year-old orphan after the 9/11 tragedy. I can tell you, this was a time, and of course, it had the magnitude of the world tragedy as it was. And yet, grieving people, and that's a lot of us, whether or not you've lost the pulse of a loved one, or you lost your career or your job, or your 401k turned into a 201k, or your kid has abandoned you, or whatever the loss. I want us to be compassionate to our friends and family, because there's a lot of suffering out there, and not a lot of people feel comfortable saying, in this society, Chris, where failure seems to be this kind of period at the end of the paragraph, forget the sentence, at the end of the paragraph. And then we wonder why suicides are so high. Well, if we do not embrace and create an envelope, a safe envelope, an environment into which people can say, you know, I made a less than empowered decision the other day and I'm not happy about it. And then I bring the prayer Ho'oponopono into it. And I say, if we do Ho'oponopono on ourselves, not about the other person, on ourselves, and we heal the dissonance within ourselves, then we are a brighter beacon, no matter if we intended to be that or not. It's just the clearing out of that sludge and that crud, that negativity. And we say, I'm sorry, thank you, please forgive me, I love you, in any order. I'm sorry, thank you, please forgive me, I love you. To myself, I'm self-forgiving. This need for us to carry a grudge has to really go. There's not enough time in life. I want to invite you to explore the wholeness of whatever lies in your next chapter. And I want it to be as unencumbered to embrace this newness, because you're not going to know all the answers. So some of it's going to be a nickel frightening. And you wouldn't suit up for a 50-yard dash on a track with a hooded sweatshirt, weights on your ankle weights, and big, huge, thigh boots and fishing boots. I say that and people think, what is she talking about? I'm talking about suit up for the race you're in. Shed the shame, shed all that extra baggage, much of it negative. Let's prepare for the next step to be even better than what we've ever experienced in our lives. And let's allow ourselves to be open. And in that same space, allow the space for the people around us to come and share. And that might start with us becoming vulnerable in their presence. And we may say to a select group of people at the beginning, and then maybe to a very large audience, I've made some missteps. And I'll say this, it's on tape, it's already on the internet. I made a very large financial misstep. You can imagine how horrifying this was to a very, very dedicated, certified financial planner with, at the time, 19 years of experience. Yeah, I invested in something I believed in, and it was a scheme. I felt horribly. And yet by my saying that, I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and say, oh, I didn't feel so badly now because, you did that and that was your field. Yeah. Now, here's the difference. I made a misstep and I recovered. I'm not still carrying, top of mind, the tire tracks on my back, or the memory of, yes, on January 7th, I lost $6,000 in the stock market. No, I have recovered from that, and I can help other people recover from their missteps. And until we normalize, if you will, the process called life as imperfect human beings, we will continue to cast the pall on this notion of failure and mistakes, missteps. And it's absolutely unreasonable. And if people are that insecure that they need to put someone else down and accentuate someone else's misstep in order for them to feel good about themselves, here's the deal. Take out a mirror and say to yourself, I love you. You're worth it. You're valuable. And we won't maybe need to do all this other nonsense acting out, right? So I'm attempting not to be judgmental, and yet I'm also attempting to call us into responsibility, because responsibility is important for us to be living in community with each other. And we're very bifurcated now in the United States of America. We are. We can hardly even talk with other people of a different political persuasion. It's a judgment. It's a judgment. It's a judgment. Guess what? There's only one way, and that's down from that kind of isolation and that kind of vitriol. Let's open ourselves to our humanness. Let's open ourselves to bringing humanity together. And this is a very large test, my friends, when our democracy is hanging in the balance. It's up to us to bring the verve, to bring the spirit, and to bring the dedication and the energy to a unified family, friends, community, united States of America in this country, and then into the world.
Absolutely, 110%. And I really want to also bring this into the mix too as well. Philip and Margaret, glad that you could join us too as well. As you were just sharing there about you kind of like pressing the thumb on the people and kind of have that judgment on them and everything like that. Again, I kid you not, uh, Deborah, it kind of hit me yet again with like a ton of bricks of what John C. Maxwell again said in that great book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, is that why did we even get taught as kids playing King of the Hill?
Yeah.
Why? Why were we taught that? Well, for us to get to the top, we got to stamp on somebody else to get there.
That's
We
right.
don't have to do that no longer.
No,
And
you
again,
don't.
I truly believe that was something that was learned. I truly believe it was done from a place of playfulness, and that's some kids do.
Mhm.
But there was an actual message behind that for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And people kind of said, wait a minute. I remember back in the day, I could get over Bobby to get to Sue to get over to Bill and really didn't be on top because I could jump on all their backs and get to the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And that's why I have it right in the very photograph right there. It's about we rise by lifting others. And I absolutely believe in that, Deborah, that when we help others because we want to, not because we have to, because I truly believe, yet again, this is a big thing for me and all of us here at Bring Humanity Together, that choice is the ultimate path of freedom. And when we give people the choice to choose their path, choose their direction, choose the way they even show up to one another and also to ourselves,
Mhm.
then maybe, just maybe, we no longer have to play King of the Hill anymore. We no longer have to put people in that proverbial box that says you can only be this certain way to this certain group of people.
That's right.
And again, John C. Maxwell said it best. And again, that 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, what he said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. It's not a title, it's not a rank, it's not even a position. It's influence.
Yeah.
And Deborah, I truly believe how we show up to that influence will dictate which way people will go.
That's
Will
right.
they run from you? Will they go with you? Will they be neutral to you? And I got to ask you, Deborah, have you in your life seen that come to fruition? And not only in the way that you led, not only with your influence, but the way you led with your own very humanity in and of itself. And how's that played out for you on your journey?
Well, when you're talking about leading, I think one of the, this might be a little bit circuitous, but one of the facets of a good leader is to know when to lead and when to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I actually was privileged to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in 2019 with my dear friend Werner Berger, who was in the Guinness World Books. He crested all the 7 highest mountains in the world. And we went on the safari first, and then we had a day between, and then we were going to climb. Of course, I trained for 6 months, 9 months. I drank bad water, and I was sick as a dog. Sick. Everybody else is carb loading. I can't keep anything down, even a sip of water. And now I'm saying, I got myself over here to Africa. We did I've been trained. I've been telling people about it. I've been looking forward to it. And I'm sick as a dog. Do I even start? So I asked Werner, and he says, it's up to you. He says, I'll do my best to support you and so forth. I was so sick, Chris. I decided, yeah, I'm doing it. I said, yes. And I started. And I did not have my head above this position looking at the next step. And my one request of Werner is I'm right behind the professional guide. And when the heel of his boot went up, the toe of my boot, same foot, went under because I didn't have the wherewithal to figure out my next step. That's how sick I was. I'm almost a day and a half climbing Kilimanjaro. And I think I'm a photographer. I love that. I'm thinking it's got to be beautiful. I raised my head up and the whole mountain was doing like this. I were completely down. So for 2 days, I was head down, and I just kept saying to myself and audibly, boot, boot, boot. I knew how to follow. I'm a heck of a leader. And when I know I'm out of my realm and there's someone far more capable, I'm going to know enough to follow. Well, thanks be to God and a lot of prayer of a lot of friends around me, I made it and I crested to the top. And yet it was a perfect example in people in our group saying, well, then people got tired. It was tiresome, right? Hey, wait a minute. If Debra can start out that sick and still stay the course, we're all going to. And so we completely, banded together. Now, this is a little microcosm example. And yet when I tell the story, other people think when they're climbing a mountain, they come back to say to me, I was doing this. And I thought, you were sick for 2 of those 5 days of the ascent, and you did it. And so when we can hold out these stories and fill our minds, not with the daily news, with stories of success, they're everywhere. They're on your smartphone. They're in your sphere. If you just go to your church, your synagogue, or your community and ask an older person to relay to you their 5 most proud moments or the biggest accomplishments they ever did, they're going to tell you some stories that are going to be indelibly printed in your mind. And I invite you to be in dialogue with these octogenarians and older, because they have a wealth of knowledge that is about to pass. And I want us to capture some of it and embody it in our own lives and in the lives we touch.
And you're absolutely right. And it's like what you just shared there when you were especially on the side of that mountain, and you said to yourself, I got to keep moving forward. I got to keep moving forward. What came up for me as you were sharing that is that great scene in one of the Rocky movies. I forget which one it was, but it's when Sylvester Stallone was kind of talking to his son and everything, and he's like, life is the hardest hitter around. It's not about how hard you get hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
That's it.
And when you shared that just really I'm getting chills by just even saying it. It really shows what we can do in life, because again, I've kind of share this with people every day, and I want to get your take on it. Do you rather have life happen to you, Debra, or life happening for you?
Oh, I'm all for life happening for me. And I grant you that when something unexpected hits, it tends to shock people and send people adrift a nickel. And so, I mean, I'm all about planning, right? I was a financial planner, and I can plan a mean picnic. So I think if we have a cursory plan and we get hit upside the head with something completely unexpected, it's so much better to have that cursory plan, because then we say, whoa, never saw that coming. Yet, so now how do I had this plan? Well, that's not going to happen according to Hoyle here. So how do I tweak it and pivot versus getting hit upside the head and say, what next? Right? Well, if you have no plan, it can tend to send you into an abyss, and then you're mired and you just keep digging, And I say, if you find yourself getting deeper into a depressive hole, stop digging. Yet the way in which we can avert perhaps falling so deeply into our holes and our setbacks and our pauses, if not paralysis momentarily, I hope it's momentary, is to have a plan for anything. Have an idea, which causes us to circle back to at the outset of the intentionality conversation, Chris. And that is, let us be intentional about our lives, because there are people that aren't living now that probably, would have preferred to. So let's take our life right now. I often say to people, don't wait until you or someone close to you has a negative diagnosis. Don't wait for that. What people do then is say, oh my gosh, if I had a year to live, the doctor says, yeah, I had a year to live. Well, it's going to be very upsetting, probably, that news. And then people like scurry around, try to figure out what they're going to do in that year. How about we go about being grateful for each day that we have a pulse and we have the recognition of opportunities and the people around us. Tell those close to us that we love them. That, my friends, is the unifier. love. Love, love, love. I'm not saying approve of every single nuance. I'm saying love through it all. That will bring us together, unlike any cement or superglue or any ideology. It's a love. Chris, Charles, you're in a country where, you know, your language, presumably English isn't the predominant language. And yet when you smile, like people, like some of my cousins are like, oh, the pandemic, you know, I hate to wear a mask because people can't see my smile. Guess what? Here's the deal. I wore a mask during the pandemic. Yes, I did, because I was sensitive to the needs of others, right? But here's my mask. Here's me with a mask, for example, running down the road, like apparently some of my cousins, like really depressed, like, and here's me with the same mask greeting a person on the side of the road. You know what? That mask didn't mean anything. My eyes said, hello, I see you. I recognize you. I'm winking at you. Whatever our route, wherever we're thrust or find ourselves. And if it's in a, let's persevere. If it's in a down place, the Japanese fall down 7, get up 8. I want us to be getting up. I don't care how many missteps, because there's a whole lot of missteps before the Wright brothers really took flight, right? And there's a whole lot of missteps in every family's life. They may not wear it on their t-shirts. And yet there's some semblance of suffering and challenge in almost everyone, if not everyone. And I invite us to clear out our own sludge, open ourselves and our neuro pathways to new and empowering and positive mindset and practices. And that will be a beacon to others. My company, We Can Do It Women, that's the trademark I own, We Can Do It Women. And the tagline is women busting barriers, building bridges to bring others with us, and becoming even brighter beacons. And that is my challenge for each of us, to bring humanity closer together.
And I love that, Deborah.
Chris, if I may interject a couple of things. One, I love, Deborah, how you bringing up the whole thing of humanity. And as we can, there are so many different things about us. We can easily say, well, I am not like you and will not accept you because of this, that, or the other thing, and not be humanity. And that's a huge issue in the U.S. right now.
Yes, it
and
is.
Then also you talked about, well, what happens if you get a diagnosis that you've got only such amount of time to live. I actually would see that as a positive, because then it's like, the doctor told me I'm going to be dead in 6 to 9 months. Wonderful. Then I can freely say, okay, what are my priorities? What do I want to accomplish in my life? And say, to hell with fear, to hell with doubt, to hell with what anyone else says about that. I'm going to do A, or I'm going to do A, B, and C. And will I succeed? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm going to do those because that is what I want to do before I'm out of here.
That's right. I couldn't agree more, Charles. And to your first point, here's the thing. We can have ideological differences. We can have racial differences. We can have sexual preference differences. Although sexual preference is really not the size of it at all. It's an orientation. And we can have the differences. And yet I invite us to look for the similarities, right? Look for the similarities, because the love is in each of us. Might have a little crust over it, which could be obliterated with some insertions of love, right? So the aspect of finding the similarities that bind us together and attempting to live amidst the disagreements and the disparities in maybe tertiary things, So it's the looking for the similarities that I invite us to engage in. You hit the nail right on the head. And the issue of, I totally agree. However, I know so many people that the doctor said they would have been dead. That was 13 years ago, 27 years ago. So that I would never take that as a prescription. However, I'm certainly wanting us to be about entertaining new challenges and busting through barriers we never thought we might say yes to. And now we're saying yes to it. Like I say to grandmothers, you didn't give two rats about soccer until your granddaughter came home and said, Grandma, I'm going to play soccer. And pretty soon you're looking up, the rules, you're going to her games, you're all involved in it, right? That's the thing. If you know somebody and you love somebody, let's be about celebrating the newness, if you will, that they bring and their interests and their love brings to our life. And let's normalize the love. Let's approach each other in love rather than this kind of, oh, you were wrong, I was right. I mean, this is really divisive. And I want us to divide and melt that divisiveness. And what can do that is love above anything else. It is the elixir. It is the elixir to bringing humanity together.
Yep, 100%. And we got to give some shout outs to Diane and Margaret and Philip and Sharon, who was all on the stream today. We greatly, and also Hope on Facebook. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us today. And again, thank you, Charles, for showing up today. We greatly appreciate you.
Indeed.
And Deborah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your story with us today on Conversation for Humanity. But I give you the final thought of the day. And Deborah, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I basically want to give everybody a love hug, because this is the hope. This is the hope for us as individuals and as units, be they familial units, community units. And I invite us to be giving of ourselves and that love and our money, and the return will be absolutely a multiple of what we give out. I've experienced it. Millions of people have experienced it. And I invite each of us to be in that flow, if you will, because that's life-giving, the flow and the energy of life and love. Let's bring it together. And Chris, I continue to commend you for this show and the influence and the impact you have on the multiple of listeners that I have experienced on looking at the recordings. Well done, sir. Keep on keeping on.
Well, no, thank you. And it's all really due to the great people who show up each and every single day, like Margaret and Diane and Philip. And I'm just so humbled and honored by them, because, truly bringing humanity together wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for people like them. Because I just truly know that if I can surround myself with people who know what they know far better than me, it's not a matter of if this gets big. It's only going to be a matter of when and who's on board. And they can actually resonate with the mission and vision that we have here. And it's about just literally, more importantly, it's about extending that invitation and knowing that the very act of giving is in the very act of receiving. So it's all there. So again, it's all to the people who make this happen. Now, because I'm just only maybe the coalition builder and founder of all this, and I get that. But sometimes that's where it all starts. And maybe it starts with that one person. And that's how you can start a movement, that one person takes it to the next, and it takes it to the next, and creates a legacy, and literally creates that ripple effect throughout space and time, and really can be a long-lasting one, that where it can not only bring people together, but bring it from different points of view and everything in between. And I love that. So, Charles, thank you so much, sir, for being on the show with us. And again, Deborah, thank you for showing up today. We greatly appreciate you. And we can't wait to, moving forward, collaborate with you and do some much great work that's needed for humanity. And again, thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Philip, for showing up today. And if you'd like to come share your story on Conversation for Humanity, we would love for you to do that. So all you have to do is, the link is in the comment section of today's call. Please go check that out and show up your guest appearance spot. And they're going fast. I kid you not. We're already going into September already. So it's getting there. So again, Deborah, like I said, thank you so much. Like I said, we can't wait to collaborate with you moving forward and everything like that. And then from all of us here at Bringing Humanity Together, Adaptive Strategy Group, and Eat, Adapt, and Grow, we're so humbled and honored to be in this space with you guys. So you have a wonderful Wednesday. Make your day. We'll see you next week on Conversation for Humanity. Have a great day, everyone.